The house stood on a perpetually damp street in Oregon, hunched under moss-laden trees that wept rain more often than not. For Maya, inheriting her estranged grandmother Willowbrook's house was less a windfall, more a weighty obligation. A graphic designer juggling remote work and dwindling savings, she needed the asset, but the place itself hummed with a low frequency of neglect and unsettling, half-forgotten childhood unease. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight filtering through grimy windows, the air thick with the scent of mildew and time. From the moment she stepped inside, Maya knew the real problem, the heart of the decay, lay beneath the floorboards, in the perpetually locked basement. Let's begin the story. Get comfortable and listen closely. Maya wrestled with the warped wooden door leading down into the darkness. It hadn't been locked, merely swollen shut, jammed tight against the frame by years of relentless humidity. With a final, shoulder-straining heave, it scraped open, releasing a blast of cold, subterranean air that smelled profoundly of wet earth, rot, and something else. Something vaguely sweet, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. She flicked a switch near the doorway. Nothing. The bulb was likely dead, or the wiring shot. Typical. Gripping her phone, its flashlight beam cutting a nervous sway through the oppressive gloom, Maya descended the rickety wooden stairs. Each step groaned under her weight, threatening collapse. The air grew heavier, colder, pressing in on her. Water trickled audibly somewhere in the darkness, a constant, mournful drip. The basement was worse than she could have imagined. Low ceilings crisscrossed with cobwebs thick as shrouds, stone walls weeping moisture, and a floor that was part concrete, part packed earth, slick with dampness in patches. Years of her grandmother's life, or rather, the forgotten detritus of it, lay scattered in chaotic piles. Cardboard boxes slumped into damp, illegible pulp. Wooden furniture, dark with moisture, listed at odd angles. Rows upon rows of mason jars lined sagging shelves, their contents murky and unidentifiable, pickles turned to black sludge, preserves clouded with bacterial blooms. Rotting fabrics spilled from trunks, their patterns obscured by mold. Waterlogged books formed soft, decomposing bricks. It was a tomb of forgotten things, actively surrendering to decay. She'd known her grandmother primarily through strange holiday visits and awkward phone calls. Willowbrook had been a woman Maya remembered as sharp-edged, private, and vaguely obsessed with her garden, even after she became too frail to manage the outside plots. There were fragments of memory, hushed arguments between her mother and grandmother, mentions of Willowbrook's projects, a childhood warning never, ever to go into the basement. Why? Maya couldn't recall. Just a lingering sense of forbiddance. Now, standing in the heart of that forbidden space, Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It felt watchful. As if the accumulated weight of discarded objects held some residual awareness. She nudged a collapsed box with her foot. A cascade of glass photographic negatives spilled out, milky images of faces she didn't recognize, moments lost to time. Her pragmatic side kicked in, pushing back the unease. This was a job. A massive, disgusting job, but a necessary one. Clear it out, assess the foundation damage, call in professionals for the mold, because there was definitely mold. Fuzzy white patches clung to the ceiling joists, and blackish-green stains crept up the walls near the floor. Standard basement horrors. She'd need gloves, a respirator, bleach, the works. She methodically swept her light across the space, trying to gauge the scale of the task. Storage, chunk, more junk. A rusting washing machine stood silent sentinel in one corner. An old workbench sagged under the weight of more jars and strange, corroded tools. Her light snagged on a leaking copper pipe near the back wall, where the stone foundation crumbled slightly. Water seeped down the rock face, pooling on the floor below. And there, in that perpetually damp, darkest corner, she saw it. It wasn't like the other mold. Nestled against the crumbling stone, fed by the steady drip, was a patch of something beautiful. It glowed faintly, a soft, ethereal luminescence pulsing with a gentle rhythm. The color was a stunning, iridescent cyan, shot through with veins of pale, phosphorescent green. It wasn't fuzzy like mold, nor slimy like typical algae. Its texture looked complex, almost structured, like a delicate coral formation or an intricate lace woven from living light. It covered an area perhaps a foot across, pulsing almost imperceptibly. Maya stared, momentarily forgetting the surrounding squalor. It was strangely captivating. She'd never seen anything like it. Some kind of exotic fungus, maybe? Thriving in this uniquely neglected, damp environment? She cautiously reached out, then stopped herself. No touching unknown growths. She snapped a picture with her phone, the flash momentarily washing out the glow before it softly reasserted itself. She zoomed in. The detail was incredible, fractal-like patterns spiraling inward. It was beautiful, yes, but also deeply unnatural. A flower blooming in the rot, fed by decay. Basement bloom, she thought, the phrase popping into her head unbidden. She backed away slowly. Okay, add research weird glowing fungus to the list. Right after buy industrial strength mold killer. It was just another part of the overwhelming cleanup. Disturbing, maybe, but manageable. It had to be. She turned and quickly climbed the stairs, pulling the swollen door shut behind her, eager to escape the cold, damp embrace of the lower level and the unsettling beauty of its secret blossom. The faint, sweet smell seemed to cling to her clothes. Armed with heavy-duty gloves, an N95 respirator mask, and a spray bottle filled with a potent bleach solution, Maya descended into the basement a few days later, determined to make a dent in the cleanup. The smell hit her first, that same cloying sweetness, stronger now, almost floral but with an undercurrent of decay, like lilies left too long in stagnant water. It seemed to emanate from the entire space, not just the corner with the glowing patch. She started near the stairs, bagging up sodden cardboard and fabrics that disintegrated at her touch. The work was grim, slow, and physically demanding. Every so often, her gaze drifted towards the back corner. The glowing patch seemed brighter. Maybe it was just her imagination, fueled by the oppressive atmosphere. After clearing a small section, she decided to tackle the bloom itself. Respirator tight, she approached the glowing cyan formation. Up close, its intricate structure was even more apparent. It pulsed with a slow, steady light, mesmerizing and deeply alien. Taking a deep breath, she sprayed it liberally with a bleach solution. The reaction was immediate and bizarre. The bloom didn't dissolve or discolor like typical mold. Instead, the liquid seemed to beat up on its surface, and where it made contact, the luminescence flared briefly, intensely, before the surface seemed to almost absorb the chemical. There was a faint hissing sound, like water hitting hot metal, and the sweet smell intensified sharply for a moment, making her head swim despite the mask. Then, nothing. The bloom looked unchanged, perhaps even slightly more vibrant. Uneasy, Maya sprayed again, soaking the patch thoroughly. It seemed to glisten, the light within pulsing faster now, but it remained stubbornly intact. Frustrated and a little creeped out, she decided to leave it for now. Maybe the bleach needed time to work. She spent another hour bagging trash before heading upstairs, stripping off her contaminated gloves and mask at the basement door. That evening, plagued by a low-grade headache she attributed to dust and exertion, she called Ben. "Hey! How's the horror house?" Ben's voice was a welcome intrusion of normalcy. "It's something," Maya sighed, rubbing her temples. "The basement is a biohazard zone. Seriously, Ben, it's beyond anything I expected. And there's this weird mold? Fungus? It's glowing." "Glowing? Like, glow-in-the-dark stickers glowing?" "No, like bioluminescent. Bright blue-green. And it's beautiful, which is almost creepier. I hit it with bleach today, and it basically laughed it off." There was a pause. "Okay, weird," Ben said, his tone shifting from jokey to concerned. "Look, Maya, don't mess around with strange mold. Seriously. Some of that stuff, like black mold, can be incredibly toxic. Neurological symptoms, respiratory failure. It's no joke. Maybe you should just call a professional remediation company right away?" I know. I plan to anyway for the rest of it. This stuff is just different. I tried looking it up online, bioluminescent fungi, slime molds. Nothing matches this. The color, the structure, the way it reacted to the bleach. Maybe it's something undocumented? Growing out of whatever toxic stew is brewing down there, Ben suggested. Just be careful, okay? Wear the best respirator you can find. And maybe don't poke it anymore. Deal, Maya agreed, though the image of the pulsing light stayed with her. The next morning, apprehension gnawing at her, she forced herself to check the basement. Hesitantly, she pushed the door open. The sweet smell rolled out, thicker than ever. She shone her phone light down the stairs. Her breath caught. The original patch in the corner wasn't just unchanged, it was noticeably larger, spreading further up the damp stone wall and creeping onto a nearby sodden wooden crate. Its glow was brighter, more insistent. And it wasn't alone. 3 new patches had appeared overnight. Smaller, but undeniably the same iridescent cyan, pulsing faintly. One bloomed on the underside of a rotting shelf. Another emerged from a crack in the concrete floor near a damp spot. The third, disturbingly, was beginning to colonize the leg of an overturned wooden chair, its delicate tendrils weaving through the decaying grain, transforming the mundane object into something alien and unsettlingly beautiful. It was growing. Fast. Aggressively. The bleach hadn't worked, it seemed almost to have fed it. Maya backed away, her heart pounding. This wasn't just mold. This wasn't just decay. This was something else, something active and spreading with unnatural speed. The air felt charged, the sweet scent cloying and heavy. Ben's warnings about toxicity echoed in her ears, but a deeper, colder fear was taking root. The bloom wasn't just resisting, it was advancing. It was claiming the basement, turning the forgotten space into its own luminous, terrifying garden. Needing to work despite the growing dread, Maya set up a temporary office in the least dilapidated room upstairs, the small dining room overlooking the perpetually gray street. The Wi-Fi was spotty, the chair uncomfortable, but it was functional. Or it would have been, if not for the subtle, creeping effects of the house itself. She found herself battling persistent, dull headaches centered behind her eyes. Occasionally, a wave of dizziness would wash over her, making the screen swim. More disturbingly, her dreams became intensely vivid, saturated with impossible colors, swirling blues and greens that echoed the bloom's luminescence, fractal patterns folding in on themselves, and unsettling images of dark, damp spaces. She woke feeling unrested, with a faint, sweet taste in her mouth. She tried to rationalize it: stress, poor air quality from the general dust and mildew, maybe even a mild reaction to whatever the normal mold downstairs was putting out. She kept the basement door firmly shut, even stuffing a towel along the bottom crack, but the faint, cloying odor seemed to permeate the house regardless, a constant, sickly sweet reminder of the problem festering below. Deciding Ben was right, she called a local mold remediation company. 2 technicians arrived the next day, clad in white Tyvek suits and full-face respirators. They looked professional, confident. Until they saw the basement. Maya led them down, her own N95 mask feeling flimsy compared to their gear. She pointed her flashlight towards the back corner, where the main bloom now covered a significant area of the wall and floor, intertwining with decaying boxes and furniture legs. Several other large patches glowed malevolently in the dampness. The technicians stopped dead on the bottom step. "Whoa," one of them breathed, his voice muffled by the respirator. "What in God's name is that?" "Never seen anything like it," the other added, cautiously approaching the main patch, shining a powerful worklight on it. The bloom seemed to pulse more intensely under the bright beam. "The bioluminescence. It's not artificial?" "No," Maya said. "It grows. Fast. I tried bleach, it didn't do anything." The technicians exchanged uneasy glances. They took samples, scraping small fragments into sterile bags. The bloom resisted the tools, its substance strangely resilient, almost rubbery. Maya noticed that even within the sealed bags, the scraped fragments continued to glow faintly for a few minutes before seeming to deliquesce, melting into a bizarrely inert, non-glowing sludge. "Spores must be airborne," the first tech muttered, checking his respirator seals. "The smell is potent." They attempted a localized treatment using a powerful fungicide, spraying a wide area around one of the smaller patches. The bloom reacted violently this time. Where the chemicals hit, it flared with an almost blinding cyan light, and the sweet odor intensified dramatically, becoming suffocating even through Maya's mask. The technicians recoiled. Within minutes, as the fungicide dried, the targeted patch appeared unchanged, while tiny new pinpricks of light began to appear just outside the treated area, as if the bloom were actively growing around the chemical barrier. After 20 minutes of baffled observation and failed attempts, the lead technician pulled Maya aside at the top of the stairs. "Ma'am," he said, pulling off his respirator, his face pale and sweating. We can't treat this. We don't know what it is. The samples we took are degrading strangely, almost dissolving. Our standard treatments aren't working, they might even be making it worse. Honestly? This looks like some kind of unknown biological agent. It's beyond mold remediation. We have to classify this as an unidentified biohazard. For our safety, we can't continue." He handed her a business card for a specialized hazardous materials cleanup service, the kind usually called for chemical spills or industrial accidents. "Maybe they can help. But I'd advise caution. Extreme caution. Maybe even contacting the county health department." Their abrupt departure left Maya feeling profoundly isolated and scared. Professionals, people equipped to handle hazardous mold, were baffled and unwilling to proceed. She was alone with this. thing. Later that afternoon, while taking out a bag of regular trash, she encountered her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, tending her small, meticulously kept front garden. Mrs. Gable was a fixture on the street, a woman whose age was indeterminate, her eyes sharp and missing nothing. "Settling into Willowbrook's place, dearie?" Mrs. Gable asked, wiping dirt from her hands onto her apron. Her gaze lingered on the house, a strange mix of curiosity and something else. "Pity?" "Trying to," Maya admitted. "It needs a lot of work. Especially the basement." Mrs. Gable's eyes narrowed slightly. "Ah, the basement. Willowbrook always did have projects down there. She was a great gardener, you know. Even indoors." She paused, leaning closer conspiratorially. "Always said the air in that house was peculiar. Gave folks strange dreams," she claimed. "Made them forgetful sometimes." Maya felt a prickle of unease. "Forgetful?" "Oh, yes," Mrs. Gable nodded, her eyes twinkling unnervingly. "Said things got muddled in that house. Best not to stir things up too much down there, dearie. Some things are best left sleeping in the damp." She offered a thin-lipped smile and turned back to her roses, leaving Maya standing on the sidewalk, the neighbor's cryptic words echoing in her ears. Gardener, even indoors. Strange dreams. Forgetful. Best left sleeping. Was Mrs. Gable just rambling, or did she know something specific about the glowing horror colonizing the foundations of the house? The sweet, pervasive scent seemed to answer for her. The bloom was no longer contained. It was insidious, opportunistic, exploiting every weakness in the old house's structure. Maya first noticed it upstairs as a faint, ghostly luminescence behind a patch of peeling wallpaper in the bathroom, near the damp spot where the shower pipe likely ran within the wall. A delicate, fractal pattern of cyan light, visible only when the room was dark. Then, she found another patch, small but distinct, growing on the damp underside of the kitchen sink cabinet, hidden behind the cleaning supplies. A faint tendril snaked along a water pipe into the wall cavity. It was spreading through the plumbing, the damp spaces between walls, the hidden arteries of the house. The realization sent a wave of nausea through her. It wasn't just in the basement anymore, it was in the house, becoming part of it, integrating itself into the structure like a parasitic nervous system made of light and decay. The sweet, cloying odor became inescapable. It clung to the air, thicker at night, a sickly perfume that seemed to coat the back of her throat. Sleeping became increasingly difficult. The vivid dreams intensified, morphing into full-blown nightmares. She dreamt of walking through rooms where the walls pulsed with soft, blue-green light, the air thick with shimmering spores. Sometimes, a figure lurked in the periphery, a distorted, shadowy version of her grandmother, tending glowing fungi that grew from the floorboards like grotesque flowers. She'd wake up gasping, the phantom smell filling her nostrils, unsure where the dream ended and reality began. Her waking hours grew increasingly fragmented. The headaches were constant, a low thrumming behind her eyes. The dizziness became more frequent. Worse, her memory started to fray at the edges. She'd walk into a room and forget why she was there. She'd find emails half-written, forgetting the point she was trying to make. She lost track of time easily, hours slipping away unnoticed while she stared blankly at her computer screen or simply sat, listening to the house settle around her. Mild auditory hallucinations began, faint whispering sounds, like dry leaves rustling, just at the edge of hearing, the persistent trickle of water, even when no taps were running, a soft, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Visual distortions flickered at the corners of her vision, patterns in the wood grain seeming to shift and crawl, the play of light and shadow taking on unnatural significance. She knew, logically, that these were likely symptoms of exposure to whatever the bloom was releasing into the air. Toxic spores, psychoactive compounds, Ben's warnings and the remediation team's caution screamed at her to get out. But leaving felt difficult. Illogical. A strange sense of inertia had taken hold, coupled with a disturbing, burgeoning curiosity. What was this thing? What was her grandmother involved in? Sometimes, staring at the faintly glowing patch behind the bathroom wallpaper, she felt a bizarre pull, an almost protective instinct towards the house and its luminous infestation. It was a terrifying thought. Was the bloom influencing her mind, making her compliant? Ben called, his voice laced with worry. "Maya? You haven't answered my texts. Everything okay?" "Yeah, fine," she mumbled, trying to focus. She was sitting at the dining room table, but couldn't remember if she'd eaten lunch. Just busy. Busy? Or is the glowing fungus throwing a rave? Ben tried for humor, but the concern was evident. "Seriously, did you call that hazmat company?" "Not yet. I've been researching, she lied, guilt twisting in her gut. Researching? Maya, you need to leave that house. Now. Whatever that stuff is, it's clearly not good for you. Glowing mold, memory problems? This isn't a quirky fixer-upper anymore, it sounds dangerous. It's complicated, Ben. What's complicated? Pack a bag, stay at a motel, call the health department. Let professionals handle it from arm's length. I can't just abandon it, Maya insisted, the words feeling true even as she recognized their irrationality. It's Grandma Willowbrook's house. There are things I need to understand. Understand what? How fast a weird fungus can mess with your brain. Ben sounded truly alarmed now. Okay, I'm worried. I'm driving down this weekend. We need to talk about this face to face, maybe get you checked out by a doctor. No, don't, Maya said, sharper than she intended. I'm fine. Really? Just stressed. The line went quiet for a moment. Maya, Ben said softly, his voice heavy with concern. You don't sound fine. You sound scattered. Please, just promise me you'll be careful. And think about leaving. Please. I'll think about it, she conceded, just to end the conversation. After hanging up, Maya sat in the quiet house. The late afternoon lights landed through the dusty windows. She could almost hear the faint, rhythmic pulsing from within the walls. The sweet smell seemed stronger, wrapping around her like a shroud. Ben was right. She should leave. Any sane person would run screaming. But the thought of walking away felt like abandoning a puzzle half-solved, a mystery deliberately ignored. And a darker, more insidious thought whispered in the back of her mind, leaving felt like abandoning a part of herself now intertwined with the fate of the house and its beautiful, terrifying bloom. The house wasn't just infected, maybe she was too. Mrs. Gable's words, strange dreams, made them forgetful, echoed alongside Ben's pleas and the remediation team's warnings. The bloom wasn't just a physical infestation, it felt targeted, purposeful. Driven by a gnawing unease and a desperate need for answers, Maya decided to confront the past her grandmother had left behind, not just in the toxic basement, but elsewhere in the house. She started in the attic, a less damp but equally cluttered space filled with trunks and boxes her grandmother hadn't relegated to the subterranean rot. Dusting off brittle containers, she began sorting through yellowed papers, photograph albums, and stacks of books. Most were mundane, old bills, gardening magazines, forgotten novels. But tucked away in a heavy cedar chest, beneath layers of moth-eaten linens, she found them. Several leather-bound journals, their pages filled with her grandmother's spidery, meticulous handwriting. And alongside them, folders stuffed with research notes, sketches, and correspondence. Maya settled onto the dusty floor, pulling her phone's flashlight closer, and began to read. The early entries were focused, scientific almost, detailing experiments with cultivating rare and exotic fungi. Grandmother Willowbrook, it turned out, had been more than just a casual gardener. She was an obsessive, self-taught mycologist with a particular fascination for bioluminescence and psychoactive properties. There were notes on ordering spores from obscure international suppliers, detailed records of substrate compositions, temperature and humidity controls, attempts to recreate specific, fragile environments. The entries grew stranger over time. The scientific detachment gave way to more philosophical, almost mystical musings. Willowbrook wrote about the interconnectedness of life and decay, about fungi as nature's recyclers, breaking down the old to nourish the new. She referenced obscure folklore, texts on ethnobotany, and theories about memory being stored not just in the brain, but in the environment, in the very fabric of places heavy with history and emotion. The mycelial network, one entry read, is nature's memory keeper. It absorbs, processes, retains. What if certain species could be cultivated to interact more directly with the psychic residue of a place? Could memories, strong emotions, leave an energetic imprint that fungi could metabolize? Maya's blood ran cold. Psychic residue. Metabolize memories. Then came the references to the basement. Willowbrook had apparently discovered naturally occurring phosphorescent molds down there, likely thriving due to the chronic dampness and lack of light. She saw it as the perfect natural laboratory. She began introducing her exotic spore cultures, attempting crosses, trying to amplify the natural bioluminescence, perhaps even isolate compounds related to her memory theories. The breakthrough, when it came, was documented with feverish excitement. A new hybrid strain, born in the dampest corner near the crumbling foundation. Success. Strain 7B, Noctiluca, exhibits stable, brilliant cyanoluminescence. Growth rapid on lignin-rich substrates. Seems to react curiously to organic matter with strong associative histories. Placed mother's old shawl nearby, luminescence intensified markedly overnight. The final entries became fragmented, tinged with anxiety, then outright fear. Growth exceeding projections. Noctiluca is rampant. Containing it is proving difficult. The spores. Air quality declining rapidly. Headaches constant. Dreams becoming overwhelmingly vivid. Losing track of time frequently. It seems drawn to items of personal significance. Consume the box of father's letters. The light. It pulses differently now. The smell is pervasive. Sweet but wrong. Tried chemical suppression. Ineffective. Seems to absorb, adapt. Is it feeding? Not just on the decay. On the memories themselves? My own thoughts feel thin. Forgetful. Like gaps are being eaten. The last coherent entry was chilling, it's out of control. My creation. My folly. It blooms in the dark, feeding on the past. It's in the walls. It's in my head. Must prune it back. Target the origin. Before it consumes everything. After that, only shaky, illegible scribbles, then nothing. Maya sat frozen on the attic floor, the journal heavy in her lap. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The bloom wasn't just toxic, it was predatory. Her grandmother hadn't just cultivated a weird fungus, she'd engineered, or perhaps accidentally unleashed, an organism that interacted with memory itself. The psychoactive spores weren't just a side effect, they were likely the mechanism, breaking down mental defenses, making occupants suggestible, forgetful, while the bloom fed on the psychic energy, the emotional resonance, the memories embedded in the house and its inhabitants. Her own memory lapses, the vivid dreams, the feeling of inertia, it wasn't just spore toxicity. The bloom was actively interfacing with her mind, beginning to feed on her present, just as it had likely consumed her grandmother's past, leaving behind the forgetful, perhaps mentally eroded woman Maya vaguely remembered from childhood. Suddenly, the bloom's growth patterns made terrifying sense. It wasn't random. She remembered how it had spread onto the old wooden chair, the crate near the foundation, the box of photographic negatives she'd disturbed. It was growing towards objects imbued with history, with emotional weight. It was drawn to the echoes of life, feeding on the intangible residue of memory. The house wasn't just haunted by a fungus, it was being actively devoured, past and present, by a biological entity that treated memories as nutrients. And she was next on the menu. Armed with the horrifying knowledge from her grandmother's journals and a desperate resolve, Maya knew she had to confront the source. The epicenter. Where strain 7b, the Noctiluca, was first born and where its core likely still resided. She donned her best respirator, gloves, and protective goggles, grabbing a heavy-duty flashlight and a sturdy crowbar she'd found in the garage. The air upstairs was thick with the sweet, unnerving scent, a constant reminder of the pervasive infestation. Descending the basement stairs felt like entering the belly of some vast, breathing organism. The air was visibly hazy, shimmering slightly in her flashlight beam. Spores, she realized with a shudder. The ambient glow from the numerous bloom patches illuminated the space in a pulsating, sickly cyan light. The sweet smell was overpowering here, cloying and thick, catching in her throat even through the mask. Tendrils of the bloom now snaked across the ceiling joists, dripped from shelves, and carpeted large sections of the floor, turning the familiar squalor into an alien landscape. Her light swept towards the back corner, the point of origin mentioned in the journals, near the crumbling foundation and the leaking pipe. What had been a foot-wide patch was now a massive, complex structure. It pulsed with a strong, rhythmic light, the heart of the infestation. It surged up the stone wall, engulfing the leaking pipe entirely, and spread outwards across the floor, resembling a vast, intricate coral reef made of living light. Thick, root-like tendrils burrowed into the cracks in the foundation, anchoring it deep within the house's structure. At its center, the light was brightest, almost dazzling, shifting through shades of cyan, teal, and phosphorescent green. It seemed to surround something specific, a slight bulge in the concrete floor, perhaps where her grandmother had buried failed experiments or the initial culture, as hinted in her desperate final notes. The structure wasn't static, fine filaments constantly shifted and grew, reaching out inquisitively into the surrounding air, retracting slightly as Maya approached. It seemed sickeningly aware. As she drew closer, the air grew thick not just with spores, but with something else. A psychic static. Her headache intensified blindingly. Fragmented images, sounds, emotions flooded her mind, overlapping, disorienting. Not just her own vague childhood anxieties about this place, but sharper, clearer flashes, Her grandmother's frustration, the thrill of discovery, the rising panic as the bloom spread. She saw glimpses through Willowbrook's eyes, hands mixing substrates, the first startling glow in a petri dish, the later frantic scrubbing with chemicals, the despair. She felt echoes of Willowbrook's fear, her encroaching forgetfulness, the chilling realization of what she had unleashed. The bloom pulsed faster. The air shimmered violently. Faces swam before Maya's eyes, her grandmother's, younger, older, distorted, strangers from the old negatives, her own reflection, warped and pale. Whispers seemed to coalesce from the constant dripping sound, unintelligible but insistent. Distinguishing her own thoughts from the psychic residue, past from present, became almost impossible. The bloom wasn't just feeding on memory, it was weaponizing it, overwhelming her senses, trying to drown her in the accumulated weight of the house's past. Suddenly, a shout from the top of the stairs. "Maya! Maya, are you down there?" "Ben." He hadn't listened. He'd come. "Ben, stay back," Maya yelled, her voice hoarse, muffled by the mask. "The air. It's not safe." But it was too late. She heard him coughing, then his footsteps pounding down the stairs. He appeared at the bottom, his face already pale, eyes wide with shock at the sight of the glowing, transformed basement. "My God, Maya! What is this? We have to get you out of here." He took a step towards her, into the thickest concentration of spores. His eyes immediately glazed over. He stumbled, clutching his head. "Whoa! Dizzy! Colors!" "Ben!" Maya cried, torn between confronting the bloom and helping him. The bloom reacted to Ben's intrusion. The central mass pulsed violently, emitting a wave of intense cyan light. Tendrils near Ben surged forward, not physically touching him, but releasing a concentrated burst of spores directly towards him. Ben gasped, his eyes rolling back. He collapsed onto the damp floor, caught instantly in a powerful hallucinatory grip, murmuring incoherently about gardens of light and forgotten names. He was incapacitated, lost in the bloom's psychic assault. Maya was truly alone now, trapped between her helpless friend and the pulsing, memory-devouring heart of the nightmare her grandmother had cultivated. The bloom seemed to throb with triumph, its light intensifying, its tendrils reaching slowly, deliberately, towards both her and Ben. It knew it had them. Panic threatened to engulf Maya, amplified by the psychic storm raging around her. Ben lay helpless, lost in the bloom's hallucinatory embrace. Her grandmother's frantic final journal entry flashed through her mind: "Target the origin before it consumes everything." Destroying the widespread growth was impossible, it was too integrated, too vast. She had to strike at its heart, sever its connection to whatever anchored it here, whatever gave it its initial foothold. Her eyes fixed on the bulge in the concrete floor at the center of the main bloom structure, the point her grandmother hinted at. That had to be it, the source, the anchor point. Willowbrook's notes hadn't specified how to destroy it, only that it was necessary. Physical destruction seemed the only option left. Gripping the crowbar tightly, Maya pushed through the disorienting waves of borrowed memories and sensory distortions. The bloom sensed her intent. The pulsing intensified, the light becoming almost painfully bright, shifting rapidly through its color spectrum. The sweet smell became acrid, burning her nostrils even through the filter. Tendrils whipped through the air around her, not quite touching, but creating disorienting currents, brushing against her clothes like phantom limbs. Powerful hallucinations assaulted her. She saw the basement floor collapsing beneath her, felt phantom hands grabbing at her ankles, heard her grandmother's voice whispering urgent, contradictory warnings and pleas. Grief washed over her, flashes of her own forgotten childhood moments, twisted and made menacing by the bloom's influence, intermingled with the profound loneliness and regret radiating from Willowbrook's final days. It was trying to paralyze her with confusion and sorrow. "No," Maya grunted, shaking her head, focusing on the concrete bulge. "You don't get more." She raised the crowbar, planting her feet firmly amidst the glowing fungal carpet that squelched unnervingly beneath her boots. With a surge of adrenaline fueled by fear and desperation, she brought the heavy steel bar down hard on the concrete bulge. Crack! The impact echoed strangely in the spore-thick air. A fissure appeared in the concrete. The bloom reacted instantly, violently. The entire structure flared with blinding white cyan light, accompanied by a high-pitched, keening sound that vibrated through Maya's bones. A choking cloud of spores erupted outwards, thicker than anything before, forcing her to stagger back, coughing, her vision swimming. Aggressive tendrils shot out from the central mass, whipping towards her like living cables, forcing her to duck and scramble away. She swung the crowbar again, hitting the same spot. The concrete fractured further. Beneath it, She glimpsed something dark and metallic, perhaps a sealed container her grandmother had buried. The bloom's assault intensified. The hallucinations became terrifyingly real. She saw Ben dissolving into glowing fungal matter, saw the house collapsing around her, felt an overwhelming psychic pressure threatening to shatter her mind. The very structure of the basement seemed to groan, dust sifting from the low ceiling. One more time. Ignoring the phantom images, the psychic noise, the choking spores, Maya lunged forward and slammed the crowbar into the fissure with all her remaining strength. The concrete shattered, revealing a small, lead-lined box, now dented and split open by the force of the blow. Inside, nestled in damp earth, was a fist-sized, pulsating mass of the original bioluminescent culture, darker and denser than the growth above ground, the core. As the crowbar tip pierced the container and touched the core mass, the reaction was catastrophic for the bloom. A final, silent pulse of overwhelming light blasted outwards, then everything plunged into near darkness. The keening sound stopped abruptly. The oppressive psychic pressure vanished, leaving a ringing silence. Across the basement, the ethereal glow of the bloom began to fade rapidly. The intricate structures seemed to wilt, losing their luminescence, sagging like punctured balloons. The vibrant cyan turned dull, then gray, then seemed to rapidly decompose, crumbling into a fine, inert gray dust that smelled faintly of ozone and damp earth. The sweet, cloying odor dissipated almost instantly, replaced by the simple, honest smell of wet stone and decay. Maya stood panting, leaning on the crowbar, covered in dust and sweat. The basement was plunged back into near darkness, lit only by her wavering flashlight beam. The alien landscape was gone, replaced by the familiar scene of damp, crumbling stone and rotting junk, now coated in a layer of fine gray powder. She rushed to Ben's side. He was still unconscious but breathing steadily. The glazed look was gone from his eyes. She shook him gently. "Ben? Ben, wake up!" He groaned, his eyelids fluttering. "Maya? What? What happened?" Weirdest dream. The bloom was gone. Or at least, dormant, its core disrupted. But the cost was etched into the scene, the shattered concrete, the damaged foundation, the disturbed earth, and Ben, clearly traumatized, slowly regaining consciousness on the filthy floor. And Maya knew, looking at the gray dust coating everything, that destroying the bloom might also mean destroying the memories it had consumed, leaving gaps not just in the house's history, but potentially in her own mind as well. The victory felt hollow, exhausting. Getting Ben out of the basement and then out of the house entirely was a slow, shaky process. He was disoriented, complaining of a blinding headache and strange gaps in his recent memory, unsure how he'd even gotten downstairs. Maya, running on fumes, managed to get him into his car and insisted he go straight to an emergency room or, at the very least, home to rest, promising to call him incessantly until he confirmed he was safe. She stood alone on the sidewalk, watching him drive away, the gray morning light filtering through the omnipresent Oregon drizzle. She looked back at the house. It seemed different now. Quieter. Darker. The faint, sickly sweet smell was completely gone, replaced by the raw scent of damp earth and old wood. But the silence felt wrong, unnatural. It wasn't peaceful, it was empty. Hollowed out. She couldn't bring herself to go back inside, not even to retrieve her bag. The violation felt too deep. The basement, she knew, was likely structurally compromised from her desperate attack on the bloom's core. The entire place felt tainted, not by a supernatural presence, but by a biological entity that had treated the house, and its inhabitants, as a food source. It was a biohazard zone, not just from mold, but from the lingering residue of the bloom and whatever unknown spores might remain dormant in the dust. Selling it seemed impossible, unethical even. Living there? Unthinkable. The inheritance, once a potential lifeline, now felt like a curse fulfilled, a burden realized and then destroyed. Maya walked away, leaving the key on the porch where Mrs. Gable might find it, though she doubted the neighbor would venture inside. She didn't look back. Months passed. Maya found a small apartment in a different town, scraping by with freelance work. She tried to piece her life back together, but the edges felt blurry. There were gaps in her memory, not just the hours lost during the worst of the bloom's influence, but older memories too, fragments of her childhood, details about her grandmother, things she felt she should know but couldn't quite grasp. It was like browsing corrupted files in her own mind. Had the bloom consumed those distant echoes too, absorbed from the house's psychic residue? Or was it purely psychological trauma? She couldn't be sure, and the uncertainty was its own form of haunting. She developed an aversion to damp places, a phobia of mold that went beyond normal caution. Basements were out of the question. Even houseplants sometimes gave her a prickle of anxiety. She saw Ben occasionally. He'd recovered physically, but admitted to unsettling dreams and persistent gaps in his memory surrounding the day. Neither of them liked to talk about the house. It was condemned, eventually, by the county, unstable foundation, unidentifiable biocontamination. Left to slowly collapse under the Oregon rain. One evening, unpacking the last box she'd salvaged from the house before the final confrontation, a small carton of personal items she'd kept upstairs, Maya picked up an old silver locket that had belonged to her grandmother. She hadn't opened it in years. As her fingers traced the tarnished engraving in the dim lamplight of her sterile apartment, she noticed something clinging to the intricate scrollwork. A tiny speck. Almost invisible. But as she held it closer, tilting it into the light, it seemed to pulse, just once, with a faint, almost imperceptible luminescence. A tiny spark of iridescent cyan against the dull silver. The bloom was gone. The house was abandoned. But spores travel. Spores linger. Spores wait. In the dark, damp corners of the world, and perhaps, in the forgotten recesses of the mind, the tendency for forgotten things to fester, to grow, to bloom, remained. Enjoyed the story? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.